Good, there's nobody there. All right. And welcome to the Art of Persuasion, the brief history of propaganda. So I really, I didn't get to spend as much time on this as I had wanted to, but this is a good intro to the subject. So the history of expressing information to influence a group of people, like the history, how we've progressed over time from the beginning to now, and then a little bit about where we're at right now, because I feel like that's obviously the most poignant reason for doing that, is seeing the amount of propaganda that's being used, and I feel that this is probably something that every group of people noticed or made note of in some way during paradigm shifts where technology, science, spirituality shifted from one mass consciousness to another. So, without further ado, I'm going to here we go. Super cool. So I'm using my daughter's iPad actually, and so the fonts didn't transfer. No big deal, but anyway, just so you know, I put a little bit more effort into it than what you see. All right, so the Art of Persuasion, a brief history of propaganda. So propaganda, arguably could be said that it's existed throughout the history of time. Cave drawings and things were, very much an expression of an individual human thought to influence someone else, ideally a group of individuals. So the technical definition of propaganda is the deliberate and systemic attempt to shape the perceptions, manipulate the cognitions, and the direct behavior to achieve a response that furthers the desired intent of the propagandist. And that is a definition by Philip Taylor, who wrote Munitions of the Mind, a history of propaganda from the ancient world to the present era. And so sort of basically what that says, to break that down, is that there's an individual who creates or poster, anything that is sort of expressing the ideologies, like an individual or group that has the intention of just pure expression. The difference from it going from that neutral endeavor to a biased endeavor is at the helm. It has a desire to change the behavior or manipulate the emotions or the patterns of an individual or group of people. So that's what changes it from being neutral to biased, and potentially, for the most part, the history of propaganda is looked at as propagate information that isn't always actually accurate. So that quote by Philip Taylor highlights the manipulative nature of the goal, and that being morally judged or put through like the test, like, is this moral or not? So propaganda refers to that represents one side of the absolute truth by taking an opinion and convincing others that it's absolute truth. So absolute truth, the difference between that and a subjective viewpoint, an opinion, is that the absolute truth is there are very few things in this world that are absolutely true. And so when someone their personal perspective, I feel that this particular artwork is absolutely beautiful, or versus this artwork is absolutely beautiful. That is not an absolute truth, but the propagandist would try to persuade the world that this is beautiful based on their personal opinion, to convince other people. And then when it does turn from neutral to bad or potential bad is when that has like a goal to harm or for personal gain. Okay, so the difference between education and propaganda is that education is meant to teach us how to think, how to be critical thinkers in the world. And indoctrination teaches us um, what to think. And that is a wonderful place when it teaches you curiosity, it propels you to be investigating in the world, real life experiences, to find things that pertain to you that are sort of stimulate your desire to wonder and grow and, be just a better human in the world. But the difference is when schools sort of use the individual as a vehicle to dump their information on, their personal perspective, like their opinion. That painting is beautiful versus that painting I think is beautiful based on my personal opinion. So that it's a very dangerous divide, when a school uses the opportunity with a slate full of clean minds to be able to dump their information into their minds or into their patterns, or how to behave or what to buy, all of those things, how to vote. Schools can be, especially higher education, very much breeding grounds for to dump their propaganda into their behavior, the way they spend, the way there's a lot of educators that call for to criticize institutions. We should be teaching children to criticize and question the information that we receive, while looking at supporting evidence and the sources. So, yeah, like I said, arguably, we could go all the way back to prehistoric times. People used cave paintings, rituals, storytelling to spread ideas and beliefs. And as societies started to grow more complex, we discovered that the world around us, or as we discovered the world around us, so we also did discover how to use propaganda or be creative as well. It just sort of divided, I think. Ancient civilizations like the Sumerians, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, they used art, literature, public speeches, to promote their rulers, their ideologies, and their ancient version of political ads were more like clay tablets, instead of TV or your laptop. So while the term propaganda might be relatively new, it actually, I think, didn't start until the 1600s, to be used in that term, of human civilization. So it's a testament to the power of ideas and the human drive to shape the world around us. So yeah, these are some images of the early, what we could consider propaganda. There's what we see, ancient Egyptian, there's some ancient Greek, ancient Roman, and then on the top right is actually really interesting, something I'd like to look into on just like doing research or whatever, but it was a cult of it was a Greek ruler. I forget who it was. Oh, Cult of Augustus. That's what it was. And Roman, sorry. And it portrayed him as a divine ruler and savior of Rome. Super interesting. Um, yeah. And then going to the Middle Ages, the propaganda was used primarily by the Catholic Church to spread its message and influence and to the public opinion. They used art, literature, public speeches, printing. First, that was obviously a series of religious wars. And the church used propaganda to recruit their soldiers and justify their actions. Sort of, I feel like that was probably more the documentable, because these are woodcuts and line prints, documented like rallying the troops for the war. I feel the way that the history has been recorded for that. So from religious to secular themes, and the artists and writers use their work to promote the ideals of humanism, kind of a bit of a shift, and to celebrate the achievements of the era. So it started to try, I feel like if it were an organism over time and there was a timeline, I feel like at this era it sort of tried to be good again, cheerleading the people and all of their successes and the achievements and things. But later, Martin Luther, part of the Reformation authority of the Catholic Church. So obviously, there's always been resistance to power, especially when it's corrupt. So this was one of the ways that the people utilized propaganda to use their voice to, in a good way, to criticize the world around them or things that other people were doing. And Luther used pamphlets, woodcuts, and public speeches to spread his message and influence public opinion. Yeah, you can see the printing press here, super cool, and some interesting mythological creatures turning up on that one during that period here as well. Yeah, that one was pretty cool. And with it came new forms of propaganda. So in this era, the primary goal for propaganda was to promote the benefits of industrialization and to encourage people to support. Business leaders used a variety of methods, including pamphlets, posters, public speeches, to spread their messages. Crucial role in shaping the propaganda played a crucial role in shaping these movements. The rise of liberalism, socialism, nationalism led to which were used to spread political ideas and influence public opinion. Nope, sorry, I wanted to go back. Ooh, I don't know how to go back. Okay, well, anyway, nationalism and imperialism. The 19th century also saw the rise, used it to promote patriotism and support their projects of expansion. This achievements. And I skipped World War One, but here we are. But they used propaganda on a massive scale. The government sought to rally again their citizens and use public opinion, both at home and abroad. So propaganda took many forms, including posters and even popular songs. The government used propaganda to demonize the enemy and promote patriotism and to encourage the support for their war effort. Used propaganda to in Germany used propaganda to promote its ideology and justify its actions, while the Allies used propaganda to counter Nazi propaganda and promote their own war aims. And then the next is the Cold War and the space race. There's so much, it gets so much more interesting as the time goes on, as far as like the images that we have in our records. So I had to be very selective and I was in a rush, but the Cold War and the space race have some really, really interesting posters during that time. And by interesting, I mean like intense. The fear was really real, like with the atomic and the scare tactics during that time for the propaganda was really, really relevant and interesting. I guess in retrospect, probably very, very much not at the time, as we're sort of experiencing similar extremities as far as like what is true, versus what is being spread as just fear or untrue, manipulated information. So both sides, again, the United States and the Soviet Union, used propaganda to promote their respective ideologies, and the space race was also a key arena for propaganda, as both sides attempted to demonstrate their technological superpowers, superiority, and to win the hearts and minds of the people around the world. So the Vietnam War and the Civil Rights Movement propaganda played a huge role in those, both at the same time, to shape public opinion. The Vietnam War, the U.S. government used propaganda to promote its policies and to counter the opposition to the war as well. And the civil rights activists used propaganda to raise awareness of their cause and to mobilize support. So that was a very complex time, and a lot of very emotional propaganda from that period. So this is a really interesting graphic that I wanted to talk about. Like, we're currently at the time where we're at right now. I mean, we could very much go into the details of the history of propaganda about disinformation and misinformation since 9/11, or even, just even a bit earlier than that. But I think the point of this is to sort of get to the difference between what we're being fed or what we're absorbing, and the difference between the information that we're perceiving, as well as like how to perceive that information, how to digest it, and what to look for as far as what is biased, as well as what is bad information or what is neutral information. So this is a really good graphic to sort of explain that. So on the left here, the yellow sphere has falseness, and on the right is information. Is it intentional disinformation, and is it intentionally, deliberately malinformation with in mind, or in integrity, for when the propagandist or the artist or whoever it is that's creating it is creating it. So I felt like that was a pretty good graphic for that. The for propagandists that do intend to harm and intend to spread bad information, is repetition. That tactic as well plays on like the lower energies of ourselves that are more vulnerable, and so like fear or anger or envy, those are very, very sort of getting a group of people to rally behind you is a good way for a propagandist that has negative intentions to sort of convince the rest of the audience or the world. In selective omission, I've talked about that, and to be able to sort of force feed the audience and get them to trust that this is the information. Evaluate with critical thought. Consider the intention of the propagandist or the individual, whatever you'd like to see it as, and consider their logic. And I know this is such a silly thing, but I keep thinking about this. There's a series of questions that are recommended to ask for peaceful interactions in the world. Is it kind? Is it necessary? And is it true? A propagandist isn't going to be concerned with is it kind or is it true. They think that it's necessary. So I always try to sort of filter the information that I'm absorbing with those malinformation or misinformation or disinformation, and then look at sources and use discernment. obvious, very, I don't mean obvious because I'm obviously doing this because I feel critical thought, to not um, look at the sources sometimes, or I've found myself very much seems obvious, but it isn't, and it's just something that I feel we need to create new patterns as we weave through this new web of information and how we share, and it's just it's sort of a way of surviving, um, to not get beaten down by this slew of misinformation that's out there. So I wanted to sort of end with this quote, which is by a guy named Jacques Ellul, and he wrote some pretty great stuff. There's some, obviously, like tons of people who've written a lot of great things, but this is the greatest definition to sort of land on. Propaganda is a set of methods employed by an organized group that wants to bring about an active or passive participation in its actions of a mass individuals, psychologically unified through psychological manipulation and incorporated into an organization. And so, to break that down, this is just sort of to break that down. It's just telling us that propaganda uses similar patterns, with either one individual or a group of people that want to bring about a shift of behavior from from beings or individuals who are passive, who are sort of just tilled soil, ready to plant heart thoughts, and incorporating that into some sort of organized expression. Sort of light, in lieu of the amount of misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation that's going around. I didn't want to come up here and bring like a slideshow of what I think is my opinion of what is not true, or what is manipulative, or what is true propaganda in a negative, morally judged way. I wanted to do it in the right way. The history of how it's existed around us, how we've participated in it, how it's impacted, absorb information with a critical mind and discernment, and looking for evidence, etc. Those are the key points that if anybody's going to watch this and walk away with it, with